Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Good morning, it's Heather. This is the SDA Housing Podcast. It's a show that explains, highlights, guides, and brings awareness about all things specialist disability accommodation in the ever-changing NDIS world. This show is brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. And this very wet, rainy Monday morning, we're very honoured to have with us a person who's come on board to join us in our team, Ian Orell. And Ian is bringing a multitude of skills to this company, which we're very excited about. And I'm here to grill him with some questions about how he got here and what he is passionate about in the world of specialist disability housing. So first of all, I'll hand over to Ian, and Ian will give us an introduction about who he is, and then we'll have a little chat backwards and forth. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning, Heather. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to join you on this, like you say, rainy Monday. Certainly was a commute to get here today. So you wanted to know a little bit about my background. Well, as you can tell, I do have an accent, so
No.
there's no brownie points for guessing whereabouts in the world I come from. I moved here in 2006 from the UK. I brought myself and my family over with me. That was... Wow. Okay, that's going back a bit now, isn't it?
Did you settle in Queensland, or where was your first landing point?
No. We came to Victoria because we had friends down in Werribee. And for those people that know Werribee,
Zoo? That's all I know about Werribee.
Yes. I'm familiar with Werribee Zoo as well. But they said to us, "Oh, go and live in Torquay." And we thought, well, look, we've got no roots anywhere. Let's go and live in Torquay. And that was beautiful. This is on the beginning of the Great Ocean Road. And but after my first winter and then my first summer, the extremes of cold and warm, or hot, I should say.
Hot, dry.
That certainly changed my mind. I started to think, right, have we landed in the right place? I guess it's not as cold as the UK, but you don't have carpets, double glazing, double insulation. You don't have any of those luxuries. So it was very different. It was the same temperature in the house as it was outside. So yes, I asked people where they would live if they had choice. And you know what? They said most of the time, Gold Coast and Byron Bay.
Absolutely.
So I took a flight to Byron Bay, Ballina actually. And then I just went, you know what? We've arrived. This is it.
Magic.
Live here. And so I did for a little while. And then I moved up to the Gold Coast in 2010, and I've been there ever since. So that was my initial journey. But I've travelled around Australia quite a bit. The only place I haven't really been is further west than Victoria. But all around Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland, I've done quite a bit of travel, and I love the country. I'd never go back.
Have you been back for visits?
Yeah, I went. In that time, I've been once, and that was last year. And you know, it's funny. I don't know if anybody else notices this, but it just hasn't changed. There is not really any major or significant change. I did notice there was some roadworks that had been started when I left, and they were still in the process of being completed when I went back last year. And that's crazy. So I think this country, we definitely do things right, and we've got the future in mind. And I think that's something that I really wanted for my children. I've raised 4 children now. And I just wanted them to have a head start. And I think coming to Australia really gave them that start. And if there's a lot of people that are listening that will come from other countries and they're looking for, they know they've landed in the right place. And I definitely agree. It was hard to get here, but once we got here, it was, it was the move. You look at it and you say, there's no looking back now.
A couple of weeks ago, I had a 2-week break. I went to my favourite place in the world, which is Nepal, and I had a South Korean taxi driver. And
In Nepal.
no, in Brisbane, which is really unusual. So picked me up and we had the best conversation. So the whole trip to the airport was just completely talking about how he got here, his family. And it was so interesting because I said, South Koreans, you don't see a lot of South Koreans in Australia because you do see a lot in the US, particularly grocery stores, that kind of things.
Yeah.
And I said, why did you come to Australia? And he said, well, previously the US was considered to be the land of opportunity. And now Australia is considered to be the land of opportunity. He was a highly intelligent guy. He's got an engineering degree. He's got 2 kids at school and he's working as a taxi driver. And I said, how long are you going to do that for? And he said, as long as it takes to get my kids through school. But he's working 60 hours a week sitting in a taxi, so unhealthy. But the opportunity's there. And I think that's the thing about Australia is that, it's a big country. Infrastructure projects are enormous. To build a road is just huge. But we understand how to get things done. We're not sort of caught up in ideas of how they should be done. So we have a lot of adaptability, ingenuity about fixing problems. And I think that's the thing with the NDIS, bringing it back to the NDIS about why we have this diversity of knowledge, how we get things done. And that really brings us back to how you got into this SDA space from your background.
Yes, look at the SDA is something that most people don't even know what those letters stand for.
Specialist Disability Accommodation.
I must admit, I didn't know when I was first told about it. It was a friend of mine. They said, hey, listen, are you interested in high income investment? And I said, absolutely, talk to me. And they said, have a listen to this video and come back to me and let me know what you think. So I had a listen to the video and the gentleman on the video was very clever, very well worded, and certainly had the allure. And once I looked into it a bit further, I realized this is definitely something I want to do. I wasn't in the position to invest in the way that I'd need to, but I liked it so much, I ended up joining the company. And I think the role that I had was to, maybe for the first 2 years, was convincing people, yes, this is real and this is what they say it's going to be. It is what is written on the paper. And that was the first couple of years. And I spent most of the time talking to people that were either carers in the industry or they were support, for instance, from the medical community. Then after a while, there started to be a shift. You started to see a lot more lawyers and accountants. And obviously they were seeing the results and they started to talk to their network. And then you got a lot more diversity of investors. And that's the great thing about Australia. There is a massive diversity of people from different backgrounds. So the next couple of years was more about how are we filtering out whether this opportunity is right for everybody and separating that fantasy that people are sold from the reality. And that brings me to here because, you try to read around the subject and you want to know more. And you've got a lot of people telling you things and then you're hearing maybe some things that are contradictory. And where do you go to get that ultimate, current, contemporary data? And I was introduced to a podcast and thought, who are these upstarts doing a podcast? What do they know? And,
And here you are now, the guest of the podcast.
Absolutely. So having listened to that podcast, I was absolutely shocked. I think what really got me was the depth of knowledge of the guests on the podcast, the willingness to share that information, and then how literally up to date it was. And this is the thing that I had been really seeking. And there's only so much you can read before you become a bit overwhelmed. So the podcast was brilliant. I could go out on a walk or a run and I could listen to that podcast and I could listen to a few more. And then I just went backwards. I went backwards from the first podcast I was introduced to, and I started to listen to others. And I started to incorporate a lot of that knowledge into my conversations with my clients. So I guess coming to this from a background such as mine is always aligned with passion. So in this instance, there's a confluence of two passions. I really liked real estate when I was younger. I think when I was 20, I got into real estate and I did that for a couple of years. And then I moved away from being an employee and became self-employed in a different industry altogether. And there's one passion. And then later on, I got involved in education. And there's a little bit more to talk about that. But that education, I specialize in special needs. And you find that with NDIS, you've got people that have needs that were not being addressed that are now being addressed. So you get this ability to become part of something much bigger than yourself. But you also get that exciting aspect, which is you can change people's lives through the investment vehicle as well. And I'm very mindful of the fact that we're not just changing the participant's life, which obviously is the focus, but we're also making a dramatic transformation in the investors' lives. Many of those people, they reach the end of their careers and they see this retirement point arriving very quickly, and they realize they don't have in place what they need to have in place. And this opportunity, this win-win-win opportunity, is probably their last hurrah. And I can tell you, from finding people that are in that position and then providing them the solution and guiding them through that process, it's an amazing privilege to be part of that. So we were talking earlier about how there's a win-win-win. Sometimes you think, well, the government will always win because they're the ones that instigate the program and put it together. But in this instance, they win by a mile, and then the participant wins because they get something that they never would have got had this scheme have not been devised. And then the investor gets something that is transformative. So to be involved in that, who wouldn't want to be involved in it?
It's quite unique. Something that is so solid and so tangible. So it's government backed, it's government guaranteed. The participant might go from a share house, like basically living in a really, really unsavory, unsafe environment, to something absolutely life-changing of having not just a home of their own, but a beautiful home of their own. And I'm talking stunning, open plan, outdoor areas, all the bells and whistles. And then, as you said, an investor doing something really good with their money, but also getting a return. So how many investments can you think of that have all of those things going for it?
Before I arrived in Australia, I'd never heard of negative gearing. And negative gearing was, obviously it's an amazing concession, but whoever thought of buying an investment property that you'd lose money on in order to offset the amount of tax that you pay? It just didn't compute initially. But this is a completely different outcome. So yes, it's something that's definitely exciting. And for me, I do like to align the things that I do with a passion. And I am an investor in the NDIS space as well. So that was something that I'm living the same process that our clients will go through. And that was important to me, because why would you be involved in it unless you are going to partake in it? So that's probably where I've got to here. There was something we mentioned earlier, which was, what is NDIS Property Australia doing that's different from where I've come from? And I think where you've got so many people under one roof with such diverse backgrounds, and the experiences that they're bringing to the table they're incredible. I love the synergy that comes from the team, and I got to meet quite a few members and spend some time with them. And I was very excited about what they bring, because in this space where it's forever changing, isn't it?
It is, changes every day. I will say, as my background is in project management, before that, I actually started life as a teacher. And before that, I started life with an arts degree, much to the chagrin of my parents, who thought I was just wasting my life doing an arts degree. And also important that people that are graduating or leaving school that do a degree that they don't think is going to earn them, they're not doing dentistry or they're not doing medicine. There's this pressure. But what I've learned, and I've learned from listening to you, is all that stuff that we did at university or we did in our jobs, that's why we're here now, because it's that diversity of experience. So arts degree, it taught me how to study, it taught me discipline, it taught me skills, it taught me how to understand people, philosophy. Then I moved into teaching. I lasted less than 12 months, wasn't my bag. I figured that I just left school and I didn't really want to go right back into school. But that stayed with me. And then I got into project management, did my postgraduate in project management. And I learned so much about the importance of understanding teams, that you can't just have people that want to build stuff. Even though you're working for a construction company, it just doesn't work like that. And so when I came to work and I met Min and I had an interview, and I'm thinking, what am I bringing to this company? And this is a company that's about NDIS property. I've never really had anything to do with property apart from site acquisition in telecommunications, but Min could see something in me when I talked about my background. And so I came into the office, and for the first day, I was completely confused about all the acronyms. Like, what are you talking about? So then I wrote my acronym buster, and so I could understand what SDA versus NTA and SIL was. And gradually being here, you start to live it and you see people, and I'm thinking, wow, this is a really dynamic environment. And there is not one day that I have worked in this office where I have ever been bored. The days go by like nothing. You come in the morning and you go home, and it just happens. And it's a really good blend of people doing everything for the good of someone else, but enjoying the process. And it's quite unique. So I've never worked for a company that is so not about climbing over somebody else's back to get promoted. Like there's none of that here. Because we've got such a diversity of skills, there's no need to compete with the person beside you because we're all different. So your skill base and my skill base and Debbie's skill base and all those things blend together. And it's a really powerful blend.
Well, how are we going to address the changes in the industry unless we have such a diverse range of skills that we can draw upon? And the industry is changing all the time. We've had changes just prior to December. And there's going to be more changes over the next, few years. What are we doing to enable us to be adaptable, to be flexible enough to change direction, to accommodate what the industry requires from us? And I think you can't have this homogenous group of people that all think in the same way. You get that group think. You need to avoid that. We have to have different ideas being brought to the table. And that's what I noticed about the team. I noticed that they will address problems in a different way. They will think about things in a different way. They've got different language backgrounds. I mean, you've got people here that speak a completely different language. We all know language changes how you think. So again, these things they're going to enrich what we're offering here. I like the evolution, and I outside of the company have seen some evolution of this, of NDIS Property Australia. And now that I'm within the walls, I'm starting to see why they're making those changes. I also like the fact that we're collaborative, not just internally, but externally. And you hear that on the podcast. You hear on the podcasts, the other players in this industry that are working with us, they want so much for us to be right and to get things right, because this is going to lift us all. This is going to create the outcome that we need. And you mentioned about Min and his focus. The outcome for the client, being the investor and the participant, they are the ones that we have to be holding precious in our minds all the time. This isn't just a journey for us. This is something that we're taking so many people along with us. So I feel like, you know what they say, why would you come to this company rather than another company? And you want to go somewhere where the people are like-minded, and it's quite hard to find. So when they're like-minded, it's just, well, you know what they say, like attracts like. So I also like the fact that they're very well networked. And in the time I've been coming backwards and forwards for the last week or so, I've seen so many different people coming to the offices that are from external groups or investment groups, and they seem to have these connections, which I really love to see. I'm reminded of Oppenheimer. There's obviously a recent film called Oppenheimer. You know, when we have this diverse group of people, large numbers of people all heading in the same direction with the same goal in mind, you can achieve incredible things. It's when you're on your own and you're trying to isolate yourself or trying to hold this data together, you will not ever achieve that same height. And that was a really good example to me. I watched that film recently, and I thought, you know what? This is a perfect example of how we as human beings have to work together to achieve amazing things. Is there any other country in the world that has anything close to what the NDIS is providing?
It is so unique. And I often hark back to Julia Gillard, who was the Prime Minister at the time, that I remember. She got it over the line. And she was criticised for so many reasons. And, you know, being the first female Prime Minister, she had a lot of stuff going on. She got so much policy through in the short time that she was Prime Minister. And the fact that she got this through Parliament is incredible, which meant that behind the scenes, there must have been so much work that got it actually to the point of coming to Parliament as a piece of legislation to actually get it through. And it happened. And that's why it's so new. Like 10 years, it's still new. We're still working out how this works and how not to do things, and participants that are being disappointed, like you said, and told false stories or given false hope. And that's why we're here. We're here to lay it out, smooth the pathway, and give the investors a good return. And it's also good. It doesn't mean that it's not bad. Everything has bad. It's not just like, fairy party every time we come to work. But we get so much done, which is the thing that I find incredible. At the end of the day, there is very little, navel gazing. Maybe we navel gaze a couple of times, but it's just tangible things. There's a constant movement forward. There's constant updating of data. There's constant understanding of statistics. It just happens all the time. And we attend conferences around Australia, around the world, and that's it. That's the networking, all those things. It's busy, it's dynamic, and then we have all those different kinds of minds that put that stuff together. And I'm not that conference attending person, like that's Min's, he loves it. I'm the steady person that's steering the ship very slowly at the background, making everything.
You know the bigger picture.
Bigger picture.
Yeah.
And Min is dynamic. And that's the thing about building teams, is that you can't have all of one type of person. Otherwise, you'll kill each other. Ants in the ant nest, and they'll all eat each other. So we built this team now, which is what I see that, now we've got you in here. We're not letting you go. And the other thing I was thinking, having the time that you've been involved with SDA, have you seen tangible changes, like from, say, 2022 to 2024, post-COVID, which is a very bizarre time for everybody in the world? What's happened since you come out of COVID to now? Have you seen any change still? Is it still evolving?
Oh, yeah, there definitely is a change. I think, obviously, the thing that's the most obvious to people is that land became a premium. Prices went up everywhere. There was nowhere that was left untouched. And there's this race to get property in areas where there's high demand that's affordable to the average investor. And at the end of the day, we're still going to be working on averages, because there's an average income and there's an average household budget. And interest rates went up. I've never seen interest rates go up so often and so high in such a short space of time. And that was a massive shock to the industry. So having gone through those challenges, but still coming through the end and finding there's people that still want to invest and that there's still those opportunities, shows how resilient this industry is. But it also shows that what the government has set up, they've thought about and have contingencies for the things that could go wrong. I don't know if they ever predicted that interest rates would go up, but they certainly pay enough rental income to cover most challenges that would be faced by this industry. What I think the biggest impact I noticed was in July 2023, when they had a complete review of the
that was huge.
The rental income. That was transformative, and that was a force for good, because there was part of the SDA properties that were neglected. And we're watching to see what happens in that space, in the improved livability part of NDIS. And but if you can imagine that the people that are being moved from those larger group homes are going to be provided an opportunity to live in a home of their own, that was where the power of that change was really going to be transformative to people's lives. So those kind of things I've watched change, and we've had to adapt. And again, you've got to be part of an organization that is adaptable and is ever evolving. And that takes data. You can't be behind in this. You have to be talking to all of the different stakeholders and knowing what's coming. Nobody has a crystal ball, but you can get some signs, you can see some trends. And that's what I see that NPA, NDIS Property Australia, doing that's very different. You're pulling in all this data, and I hate to go on about the data, but it's, as somebody that studied psychology and did 4 years of statistics, it's so essential. How do you understand the world around you you hear a lot of noise, but that data really doesn't lie. It's going to tell you exactly what you need to do and how you need to do it. And that's what Min and the team have really got right, I believe, from the little I've seen so far. Growth is so essential as well. In the time that I've been doing this, you have to change the things that you are aiming for. You have to change the language you're using, because as the industry changes around you, you've got to be able to communicate that. And growth is painful, but necessary. I would hate to reach a point in my life where I wasn't going to grow any further. To me, that's the beginning of death. So,
as my part-time second job as a yoga teacher and my studies of the understanding of the philosophy of yoga, and one thing I found fascinating was their understanding 2,500 years ago or earlier, that if we don't move forward, then we're actually atrophying. So you can't stay on the spot, because if you're on the spot and you don't change, the world's changing around you, so you're actually moving backwards. So you have to move forward, whether you're dragged, kicking and screaming, moving forward, or whether you choose to move forward. And better that you choose to do it rather than being dragged forward. But if you sit on the spot, you are actually going backwards.
Yeah,
because the world's moving forward. And it's so interesting that they knew that then, and we know that now. But that understanding and their concept is, if you sit on the spot, you are literally becoming mulch. You are just sitting there and you're atrophying, and you will end up being back in the earth again. And I love that analogy. And it's so true. It's so true now. And here we are. We're moving forward. And stats, from someone that did an arts degree, and how I look at statistics as being so black and white and so, I wouldn't say boring, necessary, but you can't create all the bells and whistles if you don't understand why we're doing it. And that's why I think a lot of companies go wrong, because they start heading down a particular tangent without understanding why. They're putting all that energy into this part of the business. We're going to do this because someone's idea. But how about if that's not where the need is? How about if the need is in, northern New South Wales, and there's land available, and this is what we do, and it's so moving, it's constantly moving, it's understanding where is the land, where are the properties, what are we building, and all the other stuff comes later.
Demand is essential.
Demand.
It's understanding how that demand is going to change, what's coming through the system, what's already been provided, and then being able to combine that with the network that you've got in place to find the appropriate land. And there's always going to be a wish list, and there's going to be a trade-off, but you have to have those things come together to make the product at the end work for everybody. There's no point building a beautiful SDA property if there's no demand, because it just becomes a very expensive empty property. So you've got to get it right, and that comes from like we touched upon earlier, getting the data right and having the network and the resources. And these are the things that I'm not saying that I enjoyed statistics. That part of my degree was quite painful and difficult to go through. But once you come out of it, you've got some tools that you can use for the rest of your life. And what I notice about this team is they're not afraid to take the data and turn it into something useful. And you can spot that from a mile away. So look, I can ramble. Is there anything else you'd like to ask me?
I would like to ask that now we've managed to lure you into our office on a permanent basis. What is it that you hope to achieve in the future while working with our team? What's your dream?
This is, again, it's always following a passion. I started at kindergarten because my children were at kindergarten age, and I just knew that I couldn't put them in the care of somebody else unless it was aligned with the things I believed were going to be useful. So that became a passion project. I studied psychology because I really wanted to get to know myself and people around me. I got into teaching and tutoring specifically because I wanted to be there for my children as they went through that part of their schooling. So all of these things are part of a passion. So I still want to be following my passions, and I want to have an influence. I want to have an influence that's positively impacting the world around me. I'm a very small cog in the machine, but I know that we can have an impact locally. And I think that the positive influence we can have as individuals can overwhelm the negative that's coming in from so many different angles, impacting lives. We were talking about we won't have time for me to tell you stories about some of the people's lives that have been transformed, but there are people where they didn't have opportunities to make a difference in their life or to get where they needed to go to. And what we were offering through this industry really has the power to make things better. And then when you talk to the participants, and I've had clients that are NDIS participants that have got properties, they've invested in properties, and they said the difference it makes to them having the type of property that works around their needs is life-changing again. So having that impact on lives, you don't feel as though you're going to work every day. Over the last 3 or 4 years, things have been a blur. They've just gone so quickly. It doesn't feel like it's any later than 2020 still. I mean, obviously the world has changed around us to a great degree. So I would say what I want to achieve is definitely that influence for positive. Be part of a team that's collaborative and growing and has that's not scared, it's not afraid of change. Being part of that growth and having something that's bigger than ourselves to be part of. That really is what I'd like to achieve.
That is a really good wrap up. And rather than keeping you here longer, I suppose we should get back to our relative desks and start doing all the stuff we've just talked about. So I will wrap it up and thank you, Ian, for joining us today.
Pleasure.
And next time. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.